It's perhaps the most hotly contested position of all. In little over a week, Andy Farrell will name the 10s headed down under, the guys who will run the show in Australia for the British and Irish Lions of 2025. And with so many quality contenders and one definitely destined to miss out at the very least, we sat down to dissect the race. There are so many contenders for the fly half position. I think this is the most open position.
It makes you nervous to think about, doesn't it?
I think this is the one position where there is no one not going that would surprise me. Like, all of the contenders, even the guy you'd pencil in right now as a likely test starter, I can see not being on the plane at all and not playing.
Yeah.
It's the most open position of all.
There's such different players.
Yeah.
Like, basically every single one of the options they have available. I don't know where to start.
I know where to start.
Okay.
Do you think Jonathan Sexton's going to play?
To be fair, this is the elephant in the room, is the fact that a man who once got fed porridge by Bono is going on tour. He's going as a coach. He, I think it's safe to say, kind of has his favourites and is people that he's gone on record as saying he likes or dislikes.
He was asked a few months ago, like about 6 months ago, who would be his 10 for the Lions. And he very publicly said he didn't rate Finn Russell. He thought he was a bullshit merchant. He didn't like what he said. He said he couldn't control the game. Began to throw Marcus Smith in that conversation. Then went, no, actually, I think Marcus Smith's a generational talent, and I think he can do both. But Marcus Smith was the one guy that came out of that pretty strongly. So I think that's where we'll start, right?
Okay.
Marcus Smith, if you went back to the autumn, back to November, was in the driver's seat.
Yes.
It was him and Finn Russell were the two players you were looking at and going, those are the two Lions 10s.
Yeah.
Then, the Six Nations, he got moved to fullback. And that might have changed the entire complexion.
Yeah. It was for the betterment of England rather than for the betterment of Marcus Smith.
Yeah.
It was so they could have two game managers on the pitch, and Finn Smith can't play fullback.
Yeah.
That is just as simple as it is.
He selflessly agreed to that, and I think it has hurt his chances of being the Lions 10 enormously.
Yeah.
I think he's gone from being nailed into now. I wouldn't be that surprised if he doesn't make it.
People would say, oh, well, he doesn't start 10 for England. How can he be your starting 10 for the Lions? And the answer is, watch him play.
Yeah.
Because he's a generational talent. That is undeniable. There are very few players in Britain and Ireland who can light up a game in the way Marcus Smith does.
Yeah.
You look at him playing for Quins week in, week out in particular. The goose step is a huge part of his game, and for a long time that was to his detriment. Sure. Now, because he's rounded out his game so much, it's similar to what we were saying on the scrum half conversation about Alex Mitchell and JGP sniping. It is the fact that he can wait for a gap to open up for him. Otherwise, he will send his big forwards and his centre through those all day long. Yeah, the step is a huge part of his game, but it is his kicking game that has become, just gradually in his time playing international rugby, the best part of his game.
See, I would argue with this, right? Because I think the most impressive thing about him is that every other part of his game has improved exponentially, whilst the attack has remained the best part of his game.
That is very true.
Right? And he's continued adding to his strengths. Instead of
he's not lost his flair,
and
has he?
having like one outstanding skill and then slowly building out the rest of his game until it's like very rounded. Instead, he's kept one thing the best. Like, he's continued getting better as an attacking player. And every element of his game is now drastically better than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
When obviously he ended up on the tour, very much as the definition of a bolter.
Yeah.
When he was called up.
Literally during his first cap.
Second cap.
Second cap, he got called up.
Yeah, which was crazy. I think he is... I've accidentally knocked over the Welsh flag, which is a metaphor, because I mentioned him now.
Happening a lot.
Gareth Anscombe, not really in contention.
Bless him.
You know, Jared Evans, not at all in contention. I think we can dismiss all the Welsh 10s basically now.
Yeah.
You know, Anscombe's solid, but...
There aren't really any Welsh 10s.
If it was 2023, maybe you'd make an argument for him, but no.
Yeah.
Marcus Smith, I think, is the most talented player available to the Lions at this fly half position.
Basically in any position.
Does that mean he's the best?
I wouldn't normally say this, but in his position, yes. I think it does. Something that I constantly refer to that just sticks in my head about Marcus Smith was in the Autumn Internationals, England needing something desperately to go up and beat the All Blacks, and Austin Healey on commentary just screaming, give the ball to Marcus Smith.
Yeah.
I know he's the fly half, I know everything runs through him, but something will just happen if you give him the ball. And that is a footnote on what Marcus Smith is like as a player. Something that we need to mention is defensively how good he is.
Yeah.
That he doesn't make many errors defensively. He reads an attack so well himself, and so he knows how to do it from the flip side. And people seem to have this thing in their head that he doesn't tackle very much. I think what they mean by that is he's small, he's lightweight, but His tackle success rate is extremely high.
There was a piece in an Afrikaans newspaper where they interviewed Rassie Erasmus after that England Springboks game. And Erasmus said, and I think with the safety of it being in Afrikaans, we didn't think he'd get that far in the English language press, they really targeted Marcus Smith because they had it in their heads, the Springboks, that he was a poor defender. And they got no change up whatsoever. And they decided at about 30 minutes in, we've got to change this because this isn't working at all. And a large part of them pulling off that game in the second half is because they stopped targeting Marcus Smith because he was so often flying up and like he might not make all his tackles, but he's such a brave defender. The way he will fly up and he will make an effort to smash someone despite not being the body type to do it. And what that leads to sometimes is if you've got someone coming with pace, like a big number 8 or centre, he will stop them, stop the momentum, he'll take away the momentum, then another player can come in and finish him off, right?
Yeah.
And what he's looking to do so often, same thing Cheslin Colby does unbelievably well, is prevent momentum and the ball movement rather than necessarily anything else.
100%.
He is a critical defender. Ireland are one of the very few teams who defend with their 10 in the line at test level at the minute. England don't, so Smith, when even has been playing 10, has spent a lot of time in the backfield. That does come into consideration, is that defensive ability.
Yeah, the game management is such a huge part of it. And as you say, the fact that at any moment he can just go bang, snap into life, and the flair comes back. If he's told to play one game plan, it doesn't mean he plays that exclusively because he's such a good rugby player. In my opinion, he is the first player from all this whole list of fly halves that I would go. It would be a waste not to bring him on tour.
I both agree with you and don't think we can nail anyone in yet.
Yeah, that's
I think we've got to
fair.
give through all the contenders first.
That's fair.
Because there is the other name that you feel like, and a lot of fans and pundits and journalists are leaving this guy out, but I think there's absolutely no way Andy Farrell isn't at least talking very, very seriously about him, which is Sam Prendergast.
Yes.
Who we just did a whole video on him, so we will keep this bit of the chat pretty brief because that is up there on the channel. There's 20 odd minutes on that, which we made very much with the thought of this conversation, right?
Indeed.
Of is he ready to go on a Lions tour as well as to play in the Six Nations?
So
tournament?
without any comment of whether or not I think he will take him, is he ready to go? Just a yes or no answer.
I think yes.
I think yes.
I think he is more ready than Marcus Smith was on the last tour,
Yeah.
and he went.
But
I
that
think
was
he
it.
is more ready than Owen Farrell was in 2013.
Yeah.
And I think there is a long history of the Lions taking young but exciting fly halves.
He's young, he's confident, he is in the process of becoming established.
Yeah.
He has a great kicking game on him. He plays so unbelievably flat to the line, puts a target on his back, and yet he is relatively unbroken at this point in his international career. And people have targeted him. I'm sure he's made a couple of errors, but the positives massively outweigh those.
The problem is the defence, as we mentioned, which
Yes.
is a major, major red flag. There's more of that on the video we made on him, but as a broad judgment, I would be very happy having him in the conversation if I were one of the coaches. And I suspect Andy Farrell has no second thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Add to the fact that he knows this game plan they'll be playing inside out.
Exactly.
Because they're not going to stray far from the Leinster or the Ireland game plan. And he's been playing that since he was 12.
Yeah.
He knows it better than anyone else.
The thing with the defensive aspect is, on one side, you could say that's something that might improve for going on a Lions tour. It's probably a little bit unfair if you've got, let's just say, pull a name out my arse, Courtney Laws goes, who's been playing professional rugby for 20 plus years. And it's like, wait, this kid is learning things that I was learning in my infancy on the Lions tour. That is the big negative against his name because he's by a long stretch the weakest defensively of any fly half that's available. Anyone's in this conversation, even the Gareth Anscombs that you've just talked about and dismissed.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we'll move on from Prendergast for now.
Yes.
I mentioned Jack Crowley.
Yeah.
The other Irish 10.
I can't believe we didn't mention Crowley first. That's so biased of us.
But was very, very good last year for most of the year.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are blots on the copybook here and there, as there is for everyone. But broadly excellent. And then fell behind Sam Prendergast. Had a more up and down Six Nations result.
Yeah.
Where he wasn't really, other than the England game, trusted to come on and be a guy to make an impact.
Yeah.
And then when he get into those late games, he played centre, he played fullback. And it was only really the Italy game where he came in and it looked like he was out there with a point to prove rather than necessarily just trying to play the game plan.
I did feel for him in that Italy game.
Yeah.
The thing is, the reason why he's been quote-unquote dropped for Prendergast is for systematic reasons.
Yes.
Because Prendergast suits the system better in attack. Because, again, how
And
flat
his
he plays
kicking game and his
and that
boot.
flat pass, yes, and the kicking game, which is something Crowley has to his bow that is exceptional.
Yeah.
Right, you look at the last time that Crowley had a proper crack at the 10 jersey, let's think about that Argentina game in the autumn that happened, where he scored a try, he scored a drop goal, didn't get a penalty to get the full house, which is annoying. That's the easiest one. Come on. But he managed that game so maturely and like a proper test standard 10, which is what he is. And he's been doing that for the year since Johnny Sexton went on sabbatical. The Italy game didn't go his way. He didn't play his best game, but you can't judge him too heavily on the basis of that.
It comes back to, does Farrell want a fly half to manage the game or to manage the attack?
Yes.
Right? And Marcus Smith is one of the few players I think can do both equally well.
Yeah.
There's another guy we'll come on to in a minute.
Indeed.
Very much that's been the issue Ireland have, right? Is Prendergast the guy who manages the attack, Crowley a guy who manages the game. Ireland have gone, well, what we want is someone to run our system, manage the attack. We'll go for Prendergast.
Yeah.
And you suspect Andy Farrell's going to go down the same route with the Lions because that is the way he plays. It's very rugby league, you know, that game management is much less important with that kind of league approach. And therefore, that very, very monster style that Crowley plays, O'Gara remade to have more of a running game for the 21st century.
You look at that drop goal against La Rochelle.
Yeah.
It's peak O'Gara, it's peak Munsterism. And again, that's another game that Crowley managed exceptionally well.
Again, no judgment on him as a person, but he plays 10 like a prick.
Yeah.
And you love that. Like, that's the thing that Munster have built all the successful teams on, and that includes him winning the league a couple of years ago, right, as the 10.
Name a world-class 10 who's not called Dan Carter, who wasn't a knob at some point in his career.
Roman Antomac, but we'll move on. So, Crowley, I think, is in the conversation. There is then the big elephant in the room, the other side of the Sexton coin, Finn Russell.
Yes. So you mentioned earlier what Sexton was saying about him. Johnny Sexton, this is why he's one of the greatest personalities in rugby ever, right? Is because, once again, Johnny Sexton, one of the greatest fly-halves to ever play the game, he's a dickhead. Yeah. He's a pure dickhead. And you wonder how much of what he said about Finn Russell, how much of what he would say about Marcus Smith to an extent, if he was asked about Dan Biggar, who I know we're not going to talk about because...
I mean, again, classic Bolton selection Dan Biggar is still playing, retiring at the end of the season.
They would have to be like 10th string. If they didn't have choices at fly half, then maybe he'd be an option, but they do.
Can you
so
imagine
Andy
Johnny
Farrell's
Sexton
not going to go
ever calling up Dan Biggar?
Exactly. And Dan
Can you
Biggar,
imagine Dan Biggar agreeing to be coached by Johnny Sexton?
that's it. Dan Biggar, since retiring from internationals, has gone on to soften up and kind of go like, oh, I actually really respect Johnny Sexton. Johnny Sexton has never said such a thing about Dan Biggar. He refuses to back down. I remember we discussed this before, but like you always said the big difference between the two of them is that Dan Biggar grew up. And that was why Johnny Sexton was the better player by the end of his career. And again, like, there's another guy that we will talk about who might be related to a member of the coaching panel. When Johnny Sexton talks about these guys, and most notably Finn Russell that we're talking about right now, you have to ask how much of him saying this is personal. Yeah. Because he doesn't like these people, because they're his rivals. And that is the way that Johnny Sexton is. And it's what makes him such a good player and coach, is because he's the most competitive person that you've ever come across.
Yeah. I'm still trying to work out what you're going to bring up Guy Easterby, but that's the point. So the Finn Russell thing is interesting. A few months ago, you felt like he was nailed in. I then thought he had, by his standards, a pretty poor Six Nations. I thought it was the weakest he's put in quite a long time. Yeah. I think there was a lot of very risky decisions. There was a lot of him going back to the player he was quite a while ago now.
The player that people have talked about him as for a long time.
And he hasn't been for quite a long time. He's had more game management and more, like, ability and willing to steady the ship.
Since about 2017-18.
Yeah, so somewhere in 2018. Yeah, he kind of like started to develop that. Then by 2019, through to last year, he was an all-court, all-rounder 10 who could do it all, right? Who had a game management side, who kicked the ball more than any other fly-half in the world, who wasn't just throwing these ludicrous passes all the time. He wasn't, as Will Greenwood said on the last Lions tour, you know, Finn Russell comes on, you either win by 30 or you lose by 30. That wasn't the player he was at that point. And made a huge difference in that third test, and probably should have played more.
Right? He was world-class at that point.
And there's a good chance the Lions win the series if he played more then.
And the thing is, you could actually theoretically still say the same now because unpredictability is the thing of Finn Russell. And as you say, him throwing those long passes, he does it when he's opened up the defence via his kicking, or vice versa, you know. Now, here is my hottest take around this whole Lions tour, this whole Lions selection. Rassie Erasmus was asked once before, which fly half would you take? Would you take Finn Russell or would you take Handré Pollard? And he went, Finn Russell is a brilliant fly half. He's got such a good skill set. I really respect him as a player, but I want to win trophies. So I would take Handré Pollard. And I can't help but wonder if Andy Farrell will be in the exact same school of thought, and I've thought this even before Finn Russell had a poor Six Nations. I love Finn Russell. He's one of the best fly arse I've ever seen play rugby. One of the best players, one of the best readers of the game I've seen ever. I can't help but wonder if Andy Farrell just doesn't take him seriously.
That is what my gut says. But the other side of this is, does Andy Farrell look at him and go, I want to work with those wrists? I want those
If I can
wrists
get this
in my
out of
team.
Sam Prendergast, what can I do with Finn
Russell.
bloody Russell,
Like, if I
who
can
has
get-
60 more caps than him?
Exactly. If I can
More
get...
than that?
And great respect and more to Sam Prendergast, right, is not Finn Russell. If you can develop a game plan around him, what can you do when you give a world-class player who perhaps hasn't been playing his best rugby but hasn't been playing very well at Bath, and give him a game plan that can get the most out of him, because it plays so much off the 10 throwing wide balls, the 10 weighing up options, and having so many players around him at all times.
And again,
right?
the thing we said about Prendergast, about him liking to play flat and getting whacked by people so he
Yeah.
can throw ludicrous passes, how good is Finn Russell at that?
Yeah.
And sure, that's not the system he plays at the moment, because usually he plays out the back of Tuipulotu, and he likes more time on the ball rather than less, as Prendergast likes. But I don't know, it could work so well in his favour.
Yeah. I either feel like Andy Farrell is looking at him as the test starter, or he's not considering him, or he's not going on the tour.
There is such a gamble to be made around Finn Russell. So, to park the Russell conversation momentarily, somebody who is, I think, the kind of opposite end of the spectrum on what we can get here, right? Who is something of a bolter. I think a lot of people would be surprised if this guy went. But I think we have to talk about him, especially because we, as a channel, are Squidge Rugby. George Ford.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Who was so good against Wales in the last 20 minutes.
One of the best readers of the game, once again, I've ever seen.
I think possibly the best rugby brain we've ever seen on the pitch. The speed at which he sees things and read things is like Dupont is the only other player I've ever seen with his ability to just like raw scan and read things, understand things.
And I know that they have Sexton on the plane already.
Yeah.
But having him as essentially an attack coach, you have to question it. You have to consider it. I don't think he's on the front line at the moment.
No, but he's coming up in these conversations, isn't he?
He has to.
He has all aspects to his game. He is a brilliant manager on attack. We've seen him play such a similar system when Eddie Jones was first pioneering that positionless rugby, and he was basically single-handedly managing that. And you can take so much of that positionless rugby idea and go, okay, well, what Andy Farrell's doing is essentially a very orchestrated version of that. So Ford could play it masterfully. However, there is another name that I do want to bring up, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we have kind of ignored one of the real frontrunners, which is Finn Smith.
Yes.
The other Finn, who has been absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, it has been very much building this hype for the last few years as he slowly built out his game, and he has become possibly the most complete 10 available here. And I think when you watch him for Northampton, if you go back over the two knockout games they played recently against Cast and Claremont, the thing that really stands out to me is the way that he adapts his own position, is the way that they seem to, at Northampton, allow him to call the shots himself instead of being a set part of the game plan. We talk about the difference between Crowley and Prendergast. We talk about the difference between all these other fly-halves we've mentioned. Finn Smith, I think, is the one who can play all of their styles of rugby the best and can slot in effortlessly into them, right? You look at the try he scored against Claremont, it is a matter of him doing that Sam Prendergast thing, just standing incredibly flat, just looking up and then diving over and scoring himself. And yet you then look at a couple of his touches later on, the way that he is so deep and he takes the ball and he keeps it with the ball in his hands for a long time to weigh up the options, versus, again, another try scored by Tommy Freeman, because I think every Northampton try scored by either him or Henry Pollock, like, they only do two options. Off a stolen line out, taking the ball, and it's so smart, the way he just stops and he straightens up and he just engages the defence. He just looks up at them and he looks at the winger across and then he ships on the pass, right? And he doesn't have to do too much himself. It's just that always thinking, always being alert to the team around him. And we saw so much of this for England in the Six Nations. He has this real ability to run and attack while still having the game management and the kicking game. And you mentioned Crowley's drop goals and so on. Obviously, Northampton went up to Munster last year and it was a Finn Smith drop goal, saw them win the game. And he's able to do that. He's able to go and run that entire system. The question mark comes in that first 20 minutes against France, right? And he was eventually given man of the match what he did in the second half, but the first 20 minutes, he wasn't up to it. And by his own admission, he said he felt like a rabbit in headlights. Like, that was his phrase, was that he wasn't sure he was up to this standard, he was panicking a bit, he'd never played at this intensity. There is a bit of a worry.
He probably shouldn't have admitted that on live telly, should he?
No. But also you could see it in his performance, right? Like,
yeah,
he was getting charged down, he was getting caught out, he wasn't getting the ball away in time. And eventually, though, It didn't even. It's not.
But
even
it makes him human.
We talk about Sam Prendergast improving quickly, right? Because he's improved over the course of a season. Finn Smith improved over the course of 80 minutes. In one game, he went from not to standard playing, France, New Zealand, South Africa, etc., to being man of the match and beating France. The only game they lost in their Six Nations campaign.
60-odd minutes.
60-odd minutes.
Turn that round.
Yeah.
That's pretty exceptional. I think if you're to simplify what each of these 10s brings, you could say Finn Smith has min-maxed game management.
Sure.
That is his thing. And obviously there's so much to his game. He's such a good distributor of the ball. He's a really good goal kicker as well, which is something that I think
massively
we need to talk about with 10s that we've kind of neglected. I think all of these are generally good goal kickers, but Finn Smith is one of the better ones. And it just, him doing that does put the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit. And it's a question of, do you see it as, do you see it as a red flag that he admitted that he cracked a little bit in international rugby? But or is it a green flag that he can get that out of his system in the first touring game rather than necessarily a test?
But this is the question, right? Does he come in, he's brilliant in the touring games, like he has been against, Japan and other smaller opposition for England, and then you put him in the test and suddenly he crumbles a little bit at
It's
first.
a genuine dilemma.
Or does he work it back round by the end? The same question also applies to Sam Prendergast.
They are both broadly worth it, is the thing.
That is my takeaway, right, from going and looking back over him and thinking about this, is I think he, of any fly-half over than Prendergast, feels the most set up to play their game plan, right? There's so many examples of him at Northampton standing so flat on the gain line whilst also being able to come in and play different roles and play the kind of, the more Crowley style of play rather than just the Prendergast.
Yeah, you said earlier this is the most competitive position that there is. And I believe there are still 3 names that we need to talk about. 2 of them I think we need to group together a little bit because something that is vital on a Lions tour is having somebody who can play multiple positions equally well. Having somebody who, if you get a yellow card, if you get an injury, somebody pulls out in one of the warm-up games, somebody who can step up and provide that option, right? And sometimes they get into the test team. Both 2017 and 2021, versatility is something that got Elliot Daly into the squad, and he ended up starting in the tests for both of those. That this is a huge part of a Lions tour. And 2 players, the 2 front runners for that versatile option, who I think could very easily take the third 10 if they take 3 slot. One of them is Tom Jordan from Scotland, and the other one is Kieran Frawley from Ireland.
Interesting. I had a different name. I was going to bring up Owen Farrell.
Okay.
I think all 3 of those play the role of an incredibly versatile player. Obviously, Farrell isn't a fullback, but I think there's a good chance that Farrell takes fewer centres than you might in a traditional squad.
Yeah.
And you then need centre cover.
He's started more games at 12 for England than he has at 12.
Kieran Frawley's an interesting one because he felt like he was putting himself in the conversation this time last year or around that summer tour, then had a poor 20 minutes against New Zealand, and Prendergast came in and played well. And he hasn't seen a minute of Test rugby since.
I can't help but feel like Kieran Frawley's a bit of an anomaly. Because he is the most system player I've basically seen in my life.
And plays equally well to the same
10,
system.
12, 13, 15. He can play any of those equally well. Usually when you get a player like that, you're a bit reluctant to start them at 10 at Test level.
Sure.
But you look at last year against the Springboks.
The way he just took that game by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, he steps up, he scores 2 drop goals, including the absolute clutch one in the last play of the game, which is such a difficult kick to execute. Against the Springboks, who are the best on a rush defence to put pressure on a fly half of any defence in the world, possibly ever, and he sinks it. Under the most pressure you'll ever see.
He did also...
And that says to me, resilience.
He did also miss 2 drop goals in the final of the European Cup a month earlier.
He did. But again,
maybe
that's...
you can come back to the word resilience, can't you?
Yeah, same as what we're saying about Finn Smith. You know, it is what he's done more recently that potentially makes up for that. I think Kieran Frawley's a genuine option. Because Andy Farrell has worked with him loads in past. And he is not as good a player as the majority of the players we've just mentioned. And yet, that's not just what the Lions tour is. The Lions squad isn't about picking the best 38 players. It's picking the squad of 38 that will best give you a chance of winning the Test series.
The Test series and all the other games as well, right? Because they need to play a midweek game between 2 of the tests. And you want someone who can come in and fill in any position based on who picks up injuries, who's got knocks, who has played themselves into contention in the test team that you weren't expecting. you probably do need someone like that.
And Tom Jordan, again,
Yeah, can do the same thing, can play fullback, can play either centre position, can play 10.
has been Scotland's first choice 12 in Sione Siopolatu's absence this Six Nations. Done a very, very good job. Really adapts to what position he plays. He's like a method actor.
Yeah.
Like if he's a 10, he will run an attack. Like did a brilliant job in terms of basically running Glasgow's winning URC campaign last year. He was kind of the star man in the centre of it. In a team of much more high profile players, he was the one who organised the whole attack around him. I think he was absolutely outstanding. Then as soon as he moves to 12, he just goes, I'm a Bosch merchant now. I heard you wanted a big silky Tongan to step up and play 12 and thought that meant he had to try and run as hard as Sione did. Yeah, and it didn't quite work like that. But then again, he's still good at it.
Yeah.
Like he didn't go backwards at all. And if he's at fullback, then once again, his kicking game's really solid and his counter-attacking game's really good.
Yeah,
and he comes into the line distributed. Yeah. So he's a really good option there as well.
Yeah.
I would say...
I think he has an edge over Frawley. For me.
Really? I was going to say the opposite.
Okay, no, I think if you're taking utility back, one, the fact he played in the Six Nations gives you an edge there. But also the fact I think he is more of a fullback. He's much safer under the high ball if you want to look at him there.
The Leinster factor, I can't look past.
Yeah, but I also think there is something, and I don't know how much Andy Farrell is going to think about this, but there is a decent chance that one or two, and it's probably only literally one or two, Scottish or Wales players get a nod because it's the Lions, right? And because there is something in the back of your head, and even though he's been told explicitly, if you want to pick 37 Irish players, you can. At the same time...
I don't think he wants to do that. I don't think any Lions coach wants to do that.
Yeah, he's been on tours before, he gets it. I think there's going to be a bit of him that goes, okay, there's a 50-50 decision here, and I've only got a handful of Scottish players. Yeah, disproportionate to, disproportionately low for how well they've been playing. Shall I shove one in here?
It's an interesting thought. Let's talk Owen Farrell then.
Yes.
He's been at Racing 92 for the last year and has been in and out of the team for one guy that we have to mention, Dan Lancaster, who's definitely in the conversation. He's in a conversation, not this one.
He's definitely in a conversation if it's not just Andy Farrell, it's the rest of the 2015 England coaches are reunited.
He's the first name in the team sheet. Yeah, him, Mike Ford and Stuart Lancaster as a coaching team.
You got George Ford's in as well.
Exactly, yeah. It's a very interesting dynamic there.
And Owen Farrell.
But yeah, so Owen Farrell has had mixed game time for Racing, let's say.
And very mixed form.
Yes, but the thing about Owen Farrell is, he's Owen Farrell.
He's a big game player.
How many times before have you seen him have mixed form for Saracens, or Saracens have had mixed results, whatever? As soon as he comes back into the England fold, he's a test match animal.
Yeah.
Like, test match rugby is his comfort place.
Think about a few years ago when he had a poor game against Japan, and people were going, God, if you can't even do it against Japan, then what chance have you got against the Springboks and All Blacks in the coming week? And then he was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And kind of, led England through that. Then goes
It's
on
who he is. It's his style. It's winning test matches. It's his comfort zone.
The bigger the game, the better Owen Farrell plays.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't think you can count him out. And you can look at his form for Racing, and you can go, this is not a player playing to Lions capability, particularly without a Six Nations in the bank for the last 2 seasons. And yet, he is Owen Farrell. You can go back to 2013, the semi-final of the European Cup is Toulon versus Saracens, and Johnny Wilkinson kicks a drop goal late on to win it, and Farrell is the one making the charge down attempt, tackles him on the floor, and Wilkinson kind of ruffles his hair and says, like, a few years' time, this will be you. At that time, after that game, everyone was saying Johnny Wilkinson needs to be on the Lions tour, and eventually he ruled himself out. We are now in the exact same situation as Wilkinson said to him, this will be you in a few years' time. That is this year.
Yeah.
Where he is playing in France, He's
an England legend at this
yes.
point. He's one of England's greatest players of all time. He is pretty much on that pedestal with Wilkinson.
Yeah. I think that there's a strong argument they are up there with David Duckham as the best backs England have ever produced.
Yes.
And he is a player you cannot ignore.
And a captain as well, a leader.
Come back to there's a handful of players that if I was a coach and they were available to me, I would pick them for every single game.
Yeah.
No matter if they had the worst game you've ever seen the week before, like Talupe Faletau is one, I would never drop him because he'd never do it 2 games in a row. And Owen Farrell is another.
Yeah.
Because I just if I'm playing a big game, I want Owen Farrell on the team.
Yeah.
And there's a very small number of those players where I'm just I don't care about form. They're good enough for that.
There's a couple more things about Owen Farrell as well. One of them, he's won a Lions Test Series before. How many fly halves can you say that about that are currently playing? That's it, because Johnny Sexton's there as a coach. Owen Farrell's the only one who's done that.
Yeah.
So that is invaluable. His experience. We talked about George Ford essentially going as like a leadership figure, as a coach, as a senior player. He could not be more senior.
Yeah.
And there is something we have to address with Owen Farrell.
Okay.
And that is, and we all think it,
Yeah.
the nepotism thing.
Yeah.
His dad is the head coach. Does that work in his favour or does that work against him?
I think it works against him.
Yeah, I can see that argument.
I think Andy Farrell will be very aware of the fact that his son hasn't played Test rugby in 2 years.
And it looks shit on all the other lads when you've got so many other competitors. Same as I was saying about Dan Bigger, he's not going to make the phone call to him when he's not played Test rugby in 2 years because he's got so many other people that he could call before that.
I think if Warren Gatland was still the head coach, Owen Farrell's chances would be stronger.
Yeah, which is so weird. But also at the same time, it's literally the person who knows him best in the entire world is the coach. So in terms of, there's so many players that we've gone, yeah, but he's got the advantage of the fact that Andy Farrell knows him really well.
Yeah.
There's literally no one that he knows better than Owen Farrell, his own son. This might all age weirdly when Owen Farrell requalifies and plays for Ireland in 2 years' time, which I know won't happen, I'm taking the piss. But yeah, we had to address that because I think that is a factor.
Right, so
It's crunch time.
Are those all of our contenders? We're not bringing up Jack Carty. We're not bringing up Dan Edwards. We're not bringing up Rob Duplessis.
Sorry, yes, Charlie Atkinson is really, really good, Sinbad, yes.
Is Billy Twelvetrees, as another Lion who's been on a winning tour, in contention?
it's
Freddie Burns, how are we feeling about it?
Oh, Freddie Burns and Reece Patchell. They're our two names. Donkey Weir.
Donkey Weir, that's a great shout.
Right.
Okay, let's
stop dancing around it.
So,
do you have any idea?
No. No, okay. The one name that I'm confident Andy Farrell is going to take, and people will disagree with this, but I'm confident he's going, is Sam Prendergast.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I think Sam Prendergast is going.
Yeah.
I think he's on the plane.
Because he's good enough, and once again, there is a cynical part of you that goes, Andy Farrell is the Ireland coach.
Yes.
He will, by Rugby World Cup 2027 in Australia, he will want the fly half, the centrepiece of this team, which is already pretty well polished and pretty golden. He will want the fly half to have a little star, a little badge next to his name that says Lions Test 10 in series win.
And you want him used to playing at that intensity. The highest intensity games you can play are Lions Tests and World Cup knockout games. So get him ready to that point. This will accelerate his development an entire season going on a Lions tour.
Would Andy Farrell...
It's the best thing for Ireland to do, is to take Sam Prendergast on this tour.
Yeah, if you're really cynical about this, would Andy Farrell rather win this Test series or a World Cup quarter-final?
I think right now we say the Test series, but I think if you asked him again in a year's time, he'd say quarter-final.
It's a big old bonus for winning the Test series, isn't there?
Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one to answer. But also, those are mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Like you can, as I say, accelerate Prendergast's development exponentially.
Oh, absolutely.
And also, like, he has shown enough for me that I wouldn't be outraged by him going on this tour, even though a lot of people
I'd
might
enjoy
be.
it.
Like,
I'd get behind it.
Yeah.
He's a young, confident 10 who's great to watch. What's not
and
to
say,
love?
there's a long history of Lions fly halves going before they're quite ready.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's happened on every tour going back years. Like, with the exception of 2009, like, where it was Ronan Agar and Stephen Jones, who were both in their mid-30s, like, every Lions tour for the professional era has had a young 10 who isn't quite ready yet on it.
Yeah. Okay, we're in agreement on Sam Prendergast. Then.
Yes, which I didn't expect to be the first name agreed.
No, but this is a hard conversation. So,
are we agreed there'll be 3, or do we think there'll be 2 and a utility back?
let's name a second one before we decide that.
Okay.
So the other name that I think should really go, and he can play another position, is Marcus Smith.
Yeah.
I think, again,
I
he
think
plays a lot deeper than Prendergast, but his game management and his all-round game is good enough that I think that it would be a waste to not take him on top.
I think the sheer level of talent there speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think you take him as a fullback option as well. And it allows you to only take 2 fullbacks.
I think if you're a 10 who can play another position, you have no choice, but you're going to play that other position as well.
We're going to come back to the back 3, right? And we're going to have to drop a back 3 option because we're saying Marcus Smith's going as a fullback cover as well.
Again, yeah, I just feel like, if you can play 2 positions on a Lions tour, you will play 2 positions on a Lions tour. Especially when you're a fly-off, when you've got this many resources, and Prendergast can only play 10. Okay, so this is the hard bit, is thinking who rounds that out. Because the obvious name is Finn Russell, but because he's world-class. There are people who will not stupidly say that Finn Russell's the best 10 in the world.
My gut says that it's either Marcus Smith or Finn Russell.
Really?
My gut says he will take one of the flashy bullshit boys, and it will probably be Marcus Smith because he's been playing better. He covers an extra position. I know Finn Russell can play 12, but like you're not.
Not anymore. He's
consistently
not played there in
playing
ages. Yeah.
No. And who would you move him into 12 for?
Yeah.
Only Prendergast.
Only
and that's
Prendergast.
only a state of desperation.
That wouldn't really work as a combo either.
No.
I feel like they just argue with each other all the time on the pitch. My gut tells me he's going to leave Finn Russell at home.
Me too.
Which is insane.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, so I can't believe I'm saying this. We're discarding Russell.
I think it's Finn Smith.
Really?
I think it's Finn Smith. I think he'll look at Finn Smith and go, again, raw materials. Like, I think he will look at Finn Smith and go, that's the player I wish Jack Crowley was.
Yeah.
And that isn't a slight on Jack Crowley. It's the fact that they are different players. And if you want someone who is this like...
And he's played more minutes in Six Nations.
Yeah, this game management guy, you want him to also be this very adaptable system player that Finn Smith can be, where Jack Crowley's always himself. You know, he's boisterous and he's loud and he always plays like a very confrontational 10, where Finn Smith will go, oh, that's the game plan. Cool, I'll just play to that.
There's a part of me still tempted by Farrell as an all-round back.
I just can't.
He's
can't
not as
see
good a
it.
player.
I can't
He's
see
not
it.
as good a player.
I can't see him not having a minute's game time in the Six Nations and then going on a Lions tour.
It would be pretty mental.
And not
But
through injury.
Lions tours throw up insane things, man. Owen Farrell. It's just... instinctively, I'm thinking Farrell over Ford.
Yeah, I think so.
But because neither of them have played much Test rugby.
And because, again, you've got the centre option.
Yeah.
And centre is one of the lightest positions for the Lions. It's one of the positions with the fewest options.
Yeah, and you can fit him into a starting team alongside Prendergast and whoever else. And that is in Farrell's best interest. My instinct is Farrell as the next one, but
Mine's
it's
Finn
hard
Smith.
to see past the fact that he's not played Test rugby. And again, the nepotism thing is just a little bit suspect, isn't it? Even though it's suspect from Farrell's perspective.
If you were to draw up the pros and cons of every player in contention for this third spot, the list of cons for Farrell is the longest. And there are the most excuses not to pick him. Where Finn Smith, there's the argument that maybe the first 20 minutes he gets overawed, but he'll probably put that right by the end.
If
And
it
that's
wasn't
about
such a crowded position, it'd be a no-brainer to take Owen Farrell.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is a crowded position.
If he was just a 12 rather than being viewed primarily as a 10, as he will be,
gonna say.
you go, well, is he...
Well, we are yet
But
to record the centres video.
But I don't think they'll take 3 10s and Owen Farrell.
Yeah, we could yet bring him up again later
Because why would you're only playing 8 games? Why would you need 4 fly halves?
Yeah, it's very true. You want to give him as much time as possible.
Yeah, there's also the option that they hit 2 10s.
That's also possible. They did it in 2013.
Yeah, and
Andy Farrell was on
2009.
that tour. Yeah,
And obviously James Hook got called up later on that tour as a utility option to play 10. And they had Ricky Flutie as a 10 option.
Okay, so Finn Smith is going to not. Finn Smith is not going to sleep well that night, is he?
No.
The night before the selection.
My gut says Finn Smith. Like, Finn Smith is where my head is at.
Okay.
My head is at Prendergast, Finn Smith, and then Marcus Smith, but it could be Russell instead.
Okay. I'm very indecisive on this, so I'm going to give you Finn Smith in this. I can see it, and initially I would have had him sort of 5th or 6th on my list, and yet you make such a good argument, and he would do a great job, and he's such a good game manager, and yeah, I will take your pick of Finn Smith.
God, it's so hard. It's so hard to nail
hard.
them down and put them on the internet and go, this is who's going to go.
But that's the
because
thing,
you can
though.
only be wrong.
And there are other positions, such as hooker, for example, where
Yeah.
you were a bit indecisive, and I was like, it's Kelleher.
Yeah.
And this is potentially a position with a little bit more weight on it, but I've got to give you that one.
Yeah,
You're more decisive than I am.
I'm feeling Prendergast, Finn Smith, and then either Marcus Smith or Russell. And I feel like Marcus Smith has the edge. But yeah, I think the big story out of the tour, out of the squad being named, is no Finn Russell. I think that's one of the big things that people bring up. No Finn Russell, only 2, possibly 3 Welsh players.
Whether that's something we agree with is a different conversation for a
And one of those
different
Welsh players is Kieran Williams.
Yes. But yeah, I think no Finn Russell will be the headline.
And I think,
just because he is a world-class player.
Yeah.
He's probably a better player than Finn Smith. In fact, he's almost definitely a better player. He is a better player than Finn Smith. He's achieved much more than Finn Smith has in his career. He is one of the greatest rugby brains ever. And yet I feel like Andy Farrell will go in 2025. I don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick him.
God, it's hard.
That is
isn't it?
difficult, isn't it?
This is tricky.
Thank God we don't
All
have to
right.
pick that squad and win that test and have all this riding on it. We're just guys
I
talking
think it'd be
about it.
easier to be picking it, to be honest, than trying to work out what someone else is going to do. Right.
Do you think Andy Farrell gets comments that say, like, this aged well?
And that brings down our thoughts on the fly half position. Join us next time when we'll look at the second rows who might perhaps be in Lions contention. We'll see you very soon for then. Thank you very much for watching all the way through this. I recognise it's a long one. And we'll see you soon for more rugby.